I have that shame shirt. It's quite comfortable.
It is a great shirt. I love the, and I'm blanking on who makes these shirts, but it's like the 50, 25, 25, like whatever thread.
I think it was Jeff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a great shirt.
Eric.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Karina.
Hey, this is not the red Solo cup with the it's called moving, and I don't have cups.
You don't have to explain to us.
You got a keg below your desk?
Totally.
Am I reading this right? We literally have nothing on the agenda today.
I have some stuff below, Mark.
Yeah, I think we do.
There's actually a weird split. I think people were adding things to the next agenda.
Oh.
And some adding to this agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because the 604 is blank.
Really? I can see some things.
Yeah, refresh it, Mark.
Oh, that's weird. I just hit refresh. Refresh. Same thing.
Yeah, my 604 is blank as well.
611 has something, but that's next week.
My 604 and 611 have stuff.
Yeah.
God, what?
Did the doc get forked or something?
Yeah, is that possible?
There's only 3 of us. We're Mark, Nels, and Mech.
Yeah, you guys are doing the wrong thing because I have 6.4 and 6.11.
Yeah.
Same here. No, I asked Vanessa to archive old stuff. I wonder if she ended up creating a new doc.
Hey, look, a new doc.
Here, I'll put the link in here for the one.
The one from the agenda, Mark, from the calendar invite is actually the one that everyone else is in.
Right.
And it's got all the stuff.
The stuff in 611, things that people want to cover today, or is that truly next week?
The top item is for next week, but because Christy said she wasn't going to be here, so I assume the second item, same thing.
Okay.
But Mac, I don't know if you wanted to move your stuff down.
Awesome. Okay, Josh.
Yeah, just basically take a look. It's an FYI, we merged it. It tries to formalize the idea of a category epic, which bridges the gap between the website category page and the sort of epics underneath it. And that way you can have comments on the epic, so you can't comment on the handbook. And you can sort of have an easier way to sort of see what sub-epics are then part of that category and go from there. So if you have further iterations or concerns, definitely let us know. That I did try to collect feedback from folks prior to merging. So
thank you, sir. Next topic, I sent out a doc last week. Hopefully everybody got it and had a chance to read it. If not, there it is. Are there questions or things you want to dig into while we're all live?
Scott, I have a quick question. I've heard that hiring is your #1 priority. What do you mean when you say that hiring is your #1 priority? What types of activities are you kind of focused on in the near term? And what do you hope to achieve in kind of the near term? Is it just kind of filling out kind of our most immediate positions and headcount needs, or can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So first of all, it's my #1 personal priority, so I expect to bias my time towards that versus other things, forced to choose. So it helps me figure out how to spend my time. It also helps me set expectations with the exec team and Sid about where they should expect movement and where my personal time will be focused. So first of all, it's a signal about where I'll lean in. Specifically, I spent some time with the recruiting team last week to get a sense for the recruiting workflow. I'll be suggesting some minor changes to the way things are going based on some of the feedback that many of you provided, so thank you for that. in general, the seems pretty solid. So just tweaks here and there. I'll probably do some sourcing on my own for roles that I own. I'll start to take personal responsibility for the early stages of the director level hires, so that Eric and Kenny in particular don't have to do that. They've got enough on their plate. I'll get in and help review apps and review assessments, and get in a little earlier in the process to help provide some energy and speed things up. We're going to add another sourcer. Right now we only have half of one person, which isn't enough. So I worked with the hiring managers plus the recruiting team to put together a prioritized list of all the 25 hires that we planned for. We have them in stack rank order based on 1.5 sourcers. We think we can actively source for 7 at a time. So we're going to put the sourcing team and ask them to really focus on the top 7. We can, if we get sort of lucky with candidates coming in below the 7, that's fine, but we want the sourcing team to be super focused on the ones that are most important. And if you look at that list, the top 3 are the director level groups. Because right now we're asking Jason and Kenny and Eric to cover a ton of ground. So we want to give them some relief. And if we get them in quickly, they can help build out the rest of the org underneath it. So we'll get a lot more hiring and sourcing leverage if we get the directors in here, but those are hard roles to fill. There aren't tons of candidates that have that skill set that we're looking for.
I actually just posted a LinkedIn for a potential director in Slack, if anyone wants to take a look.
Great. Which channel? The product channel?
The product channel. Personal knowledge of him, good person. We'll be talking to him later.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, anything anybody else can do to source people that you know and respect would be super helpful. So is there anything else you want to dig into on that?
No, that's really helpful. Thanks. And I love the doc. Thanks for writing it.
Yeah, you bet. Any other topics, controversial, interesting, things that surprised you? Anything you think will be tough to do at GitLab?
I'm curious, Scott, on, let's see what point it is. I think it is point 13. So the 8:30 to 5:30 working hours, evenings are for family. This was a question that you all were asked on the stage at the end of Contribute, with how you're managing notifications. Over the past week and a half, have you shifted your opinion on notifications? Is it actually playing out how you expect it to be with respect to working hours, and how's that going for you?
I'm not exactly living 13 to the letter yet. It's hectic because I'm just getting started. I very much want to get effective fast, and that's going to require me to ramp up fast, and that's going to require me to absorb a lot of information. So I'm definitely working outside of the zone, particularly in the morning. I'm kind of a morning person, so I've been up pretty early, working early before the melee. But I don't want that to be perpetual. Jobs have to be sustainable. And I've found if I put in much more than 9 or 10 hours, I start to get fried. And I'm willing to go hard early here just to get up to speed fast, but I don't want that to be the permanent condition. As far as notifications, I still have them in the same place. I do like to do one thing at a time. If I'm in a meeting or I'm talking to someone, I want to be there. I don't want to be distracted and try to do more than one thing at once. I think that, for me, I'm not very good at it. I think it leads to me doing multiple things poorly. So I tend to absorb things like Slack and email. When I have a chunk of time, I'll go in and catch up. So if I'm a little slow responding, that's why. So no, I haven't changed my perspective on notifications. I think they're dangerous, really. I think I want to absorb them when I'm able to focus. And I still very much believe in 13, but I'm breaking my own rule a little bit for the first few weeks here.
Yeah, as expected. No, that's great. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Anything else? Happy to talk about why on any of this, or happy to debate it if you think that these things will be difficult at GitLab. One thing I do need to work through, I noticed there's already a bunch of principles on the product page. These are different. Some of them are similar. Some of them would be net new. I have not taken any time to try to rationalize this with the current list. Are there aspects of the current principles list that you think we should absolutely keep, or do you think we should swap them out or try to rationalize and make a combined list? I'm interested in feedback on that. Let me ask it this way. Are there principles on, do you guys rely on that? Is that something that you go to a lot? Like if I asked you to tell me a lot about the current principles page, could you repeat any of it?
So one thing I would say, coming from Nike, we had 12 principles, so to speak, and they actually went down to 5 after probably 20 years, because they wanted to make sure that people could just focus and remember those things and really take them to heart versus having, 12 things to remember. Yeah. And I feel like, with our product handbook, that, if we have too much, it's going to get lost.
Yeah.
So just a thought. The other thing I'm looking at, and just to comment, the PM team principles, I love them. I think a lot of them speak to me personally. I think one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of conversation about as I start to talk with my UX folks and start to talk with my engineering folks is vision, and making sure that we're all connected on the vision. So what we're looking at as the next step is making sense. Yeah. I don't know what the problem is and why we're having a challenge with the vision, or being able to speak about the vision or connect that. I still have to root cause that, but I don't see a hard mention in here. And so that's maybe something would be helpful.
Yeah, that's a good topic. When I was interviewing, the impression that I came away with is that the company has a broad and ambitious and clear long-term product strategy to offer one tool and be both broad and deep in a lot of categories. That's going to take a while. And then we go from that, more or less, down into monthly releases where PMs are swimming in lots of issues. And there's a little bit in between, but not much, and it's not consistent across areas. And so one thing I wanted to do was try to create an artifact and a review cycle with the E team and SID to make sure that there's a clear understanding of, in each area, how are we going to go from the broad long-term thing into what we're going to do over the next year. I don't know whether we'll call it a one-year plan or a one-year strategy, or call it what you want. We'll have to figure out the terminology, but okay, that's a big thing. What are we going to take on this year, and what's out of scope? I think the what's out of scope thing is the most important piece here, because it's easy for anyone across the company to ask for, hey, why don't we do this thing? And it's right now, it's pretty hard for the team to filter that and to communicate why we might not do something that's otherwise a good idea. And I think this 1 year sort of probably at the director level kind of view of what we think is most important and what's probably below the line in this year would help drive executive awareness around what we are going to do and what we're not going to do. And it'll allow everyone on the team to respond quickly and kind of filter out things that might not match the 1 year strategy. I think we'll do more faster if we stay focused on a clear strategy and we don't get distracted by things that are outside of it.
I think that's great. It's really great to hear. I think that is that would probably make a lot more. That would help with progress. Just already hearing you speak about, and I think you're right. I think there's always the big vision, and then we struggle with the in between. And so, if there's a crisp cadence and communication on that's going to be tremendous. So thank you.
In my last role, we did it every 6 months, and that was a pretty good cadence. GitLab moves fast. Maybe we do it quarterly. We'll figure that out. But I need to work with the directors to figure out what the right artifact is, and then I'll help them get an audience with the E-team to review on a regular basis so that there's buy-in. Or at least if there's disagreement, we can all disagree and commit, and the plan we're going to execute is clear.
Scott,
it's important to not underestimate the communication challenge. This is something that's not unique to this sort of roadmap problem. It's all significant things at the company. So I propose that we can figure this out after we have the artifact, but it'll probably be like 10% of each PM's time that's just going to be dedicated to like beating the drum of this information on an almost weekly basis with individual engineers at staff meetings, in many different forms. The only thing that we've really seen has worked is what in engineering we refer to as multimodal communication. So if we want to get everything out to the 300 people in engineering, including support and UX, we put it in the team call, we put it in my staff meeting, we put it in the weekend review, we Slack it to the channels, we do 4 or 5 things, and then we hope to reach, let's say, 80% of people, which is the point of diminishing returns. It's very difficult at an all-remote company, and I'm happy to, try new modes and try different ideas, but I don't think anybody at the company has this cracked about how to really get everybody aligned on any one topic.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have to communicate in a bunch of channels. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, and Scott, sorry, this is not directly on. You had started talking about the principles, and yeah, I really enjoyed reading those. You were asking about like the existing principles. I think there's a little bit of a difference, but there's overlap, right? Like you've got PM team principles, which I think are great. I think that probably our product handbook doesn't cover a lot of that today, right? You talked about that for the folks that weren't in the meeting together and contribute. You talked about that a lot, like making sure we're operating as a team, and that's critical because we've scaled like really quickly from a small group to a real sizable team. But then the product principles I think are more, although again there's overlap both ways, like how we build a product. So I think some of those are things that we all talk about all the time, right? Like convention over configuration and minimal viable change. Like those how to build the product things are things we talk about, whereas like most of yours are actually the encouraging thing about you being our new VP is like all of yours are like focused on the team. Like that's actually really awesome. Okay. But so like I just think there's like this overlap, because they mix together how you run the team and how you make the product decisions. So
I love that. Yeah, maybe one could be about how we work as a team, and the other could be about how we think about building a product. That's a great suggestion. Maybe there's 2 sections. Love that. Other stuff. You can see that I linked to some books and articles here. I have a ton more that I think are solid references, but these all link back to one of the principles, so figure we should start there. So if there's something you're interested in, feel free to read or study whatever you want. I imagine we could do a book club every 2-3 months and chip away on getting a sort of a shared mental model on all these. I think the first one I would recommend is called Inspired. So I'll set up a book club in a couple of months. Just a virtual raise of hands. If you've already read the book, can you speak up? I don't want to assign a book that's been widely read. Mark has. Anybody else?
I read it. Kai and I read it. We went through it in our old organization.
Read.
It was, yep.
Okay.
Hi, Eric and Mark and Daniel. And James. Or sorry, that's Brent. That's Jeremy. Okay.
Looks like Josh is ready. He's got the book there in front of him.
Oh, look. Have you already read it, Josh, or are you just cracking it?
I have not gone through it yet. It's a recent purchase, so hopefully I can expense it prior to, even though it's an older.
Yeah. There is a new edition. So there's some of the group has read it, but I think it's an important product fundamentals read. So if you've already read it, you're good. If you haven't, please do. I'm going to reread it because I know there's a new version of it. He rewrote it in 17.
I'll just give you my really quick synopsis on that, just so you understand. I think the first version was actually much more impactful.
Wow.
Second version is more like a reference. It's kind of dry, and it just goes through a lot of the mechanics of things.
Okay.
I'm actually really surprised that he went that direction, because I think I've actually been through a personal training with him, and he's much more impactful personally, and I was really looking forward to the second iteration of the book.
Yeah.
I think it's really disappointing for me. It's still worth reading. It's disappointing because the first one was really impactful, and in live he's much better too.
Wow. Okay. Huh.
But I actually have two other books that I'm going to write down in your agenda here that I haven't read yet, but I'm really excited to read. One's called The Build Trap, and the other was obviously awesome. I'll add links soon.
I haven't read either one of those.
The Build Trap's great. I put a talk that she gave, the writer of The Build Trap, in product the other day. It's really...
Yeah, that's how I found it, because I was looking on her page or whatever, and then I saw the book, and I'm like, well, her talk was awesome. The book might be really good too.
Yeah, Brendan, I'll second that. It was awesome. I listened to it on my walk last night, and thank you for posting. I thought it was really well done.
Hey, Mark, would you recommend everyone just go ahead and read the new version of Inspired, or should we get the old one? I haven't read
I think you kind of have to, just because the old one, it talks about mechanics that are just dated, which was more like, it was inspiring, but it was like, yeah, but you're not really going to do this, are you? Like, people don't actually, like, and it was like, yeah, it's 10 years old. People wouldn't do that. And so his new one was updated, but I just think it lost the inspiration. So I don't know. I'm still sort of struggling through it, but it's just like, I swear he's got 50 or 60 chapters, and each chapter is like, this is how you do usability testing. This is how you do Wizard of Oz testing. This is how you do this testing. It's like, okay. It's just more. Anyway, I still would suggest everybody needs to read it, but it's more of a reference handbook than an actual inspiration anymore.
Okay.
That's part of the reason why I picked it up. But like, I only ordered it like a month and a half ago, so like not that long ago. I think maybe 2 months ago. But yeah, it wasn't like a engaging read, Mark. So
yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Whereas the first one was like, this sounds awesome. I totally But
yeah.
The second one, I don't know. It's really not a version 2 of it. It's a totally different book.
And
All
Scott,
right.
I'll share that I cracked into Inspired last week based on your recommendation. And I know I would definitely be interested in joining a book club if you're open to having folks from PMM or UX, et cetera, join in as well.
Maybe we could just dedicate one of these where people are already invited, and I could let everyone know in advance that we'll dedicate it to a book club if that's acceptable to everyone.
Yeah, I know the engineering team started the one with the book on
high output management.
Randy Grove. Yeah, and that was like high output management, and that was really, I think, well attended. Like people were really jumping at a bit to sort of jump in.
Probably my favorite.
Yeah, just a point of order. We should make sure to be inclusive of the entire company. So we do have, it's primarily engineering and development attendees, but the reality is that we do have other people. And if you do it across the company, I think it'll be a better message, because you may have a lot of engineering managers who show up to one of the product book club as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say I grabbed the book for the book club recommendation. I enjoyed being invited. So
Scott, I'll dig up the issue on it. And I'll post it in the agenda so you can see kind of like how that team basically set it up for a book club.
That's great. All right. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey folks, I was just going to say, I'll start an issue on this, and my suggestion is we comment with individual book titles, and then we can comment and upvote and downvote, or react to individual comments, and then you can start discussion threads on particular like book titles, and we can queue them up for the book club. So I'll start that issue and seed it with some books.
Love it.
And ironically, I view high output management a little bit how, Mark, you were describing the first edition of Inspired. I haven't read Inspired, but like, you know, you're saying it's really the sort of elementary outdated stuff. Indie Growth talks a lot about one-on-ones and the value of one-on-ones. Like there's chapters on that stuff in there, but it continually surprises me that people find it valuable because they may be new to management or something like that. They haven't understood like managerial leverage and mechanics of a one-on-one and stuff like that. So I can't comment on which edition of Inspired to read, but it might be something where people need the intro stuff first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I would agree to that. Another example of that is Innovator's Dilemma. It's really old content, but still very valuable messaging and foundation.
Yeah, I still like reading the book Management by Peter Drucker, and that was written like 80 years ago or something. Every once in a while when I need to be inspired.
I started to read that. I just have to make a comment. The single biggest thing I was shocked about is that every pronoun on the book was male.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how that is actually shocking now. First off, that is not normal, but back then,
sadly, there is plenty of books that's still normal.
True.
Did they talk a lot about coal mines and things like that? What type of businesses were there?
It's about early management. It really was written in the 1940s or 1950s maybe.
On that note about books, this is one comment is we have some old like golden books and like mommy stories and daddy stories, which are horrifying to read these days. Yeah, like really, really bad.
All right, anything else on 2 or 3? If not, join me in congratulating Jason for getting a discretionary bonus for collaboration. He did a great job, in particular with the grooming workshop, but has done a lot of other work on best practices across the org, in addition to having a super busy job and being a player coach in his area. So thank you very much, Jason. And another bit of good news, we hired a couple PMs, one for ecosystem and one for growth. So awesome job, Eric, and to the hiring team on those 2 searches. Jeremy.
Cool, thanks, Scott. I wanted to highlight an interesting conversation that's kind of going on in an issue about tying maturity, which is kind of this way that we kind of categorize our existing product categories into these 4 buckets. And actually tying it specifically to these 2 dimensions, one being like customer satisfaction and one kind of being the actual usage level as relative to either the number of instances or like the total addressable market or something out there. I think that the thing that I'm interested in is like, I don't think we're in a place where we can actually use those on a regular basis as either gating criteria or just simply to understand kind of where our categories are right now. So I'm considering kind of opening up an epic to address things on the usage side and putting it on to see if we can kind of get stage and category activity defined for each particular group. I think like the first step in order to understand like usage is to make sure that we can actually define it and measure it. And I think that I'm considering like starting an issue for every single stage to say, we need to define it. We need to be able to measure it both for the like activity level, like for the stage as a whole, and also specifically category at the category level, so we can start measuring it. On the other dimension, like actual satisfaction, I opened up a thread with the UX research team to see if we can maybe do like a periodic survey to try to understand that. But I wanted to call this issue to the attention of the group at least, and also see if that epic makes sense and if it's worth putting it on individual PMs to say, what does activity mean for your stage? Tell me what it looks like for categories and make sure that we can measure it.
Kind of want to think about like, what would the future look like if we actually had all this data for every one of our categories? I don't know. It seems inconceivable that we would actually be able to ask that many survey questions at this point, but we have hundreds of thousands of users. Maybe segmented up would be okay. But if we actually had like NPS data or whatever the equivalent customer sat data was for every feature, even, Like, how amazing would that be?
Maybe we need like there's that thing that people came out with in physical places now where you can push the smiley or frowny face. Maybe we need that throughout the product. So if you're having a bad experience on a certain page, you can just like click frowny face, and then we'll get at least some.
I always wonder how those things work though, because like, you know, other than my son who will always press those buttons, like you're only going to do it if like you're really mad. Like if it's opt-in, like
all
people.
feedback, survey or not, that requires you to interact, you tend to, unless you're one of those people, but that's a small percent, you have to be very, very happy or pissed off. And otherwise you don't hear from people, which is why I'm actually okay with radio silence most of the time, because I'm like, I'm just going to, at this point, accept that everyone is actually nominally happy enough.
Surely somebody's built a mathematical model for accounting for that bias that comes in.
But I guess it's always still the same thing of like the absolutes don't matter, it's the relatives that do. And so does one feature get more frownies than another feature, or does it get more frownies over time?
Well, you have to proportionate how many people have interacted with this feature, how many people responded in a positive, negative, or neutral way, and then average that, because one feature may get a lot of negatives, but that is a higher proportion based on utilization. So at least with Rackspace Public Cloud, I kind of had an internal formula based on an Excel sheet and some basic statistics, but it was kludgy.
I would say one of the things, you know, just coming in fresh eyes that I'm still trying to understand is, before we even get the feedback, who's giving the feedback? Because I think we could have a myriad of different types of users. I know what we focus on here mainly, but if we're not capturing who is giving the feedback, we could easily get some false results or misleading information.
I think in a lot of cases, if we did push out a survey, it would come with the user info, which we could tie back to Salesforce. And so we would get an idea, but we wouldn't necessarily get their role. And in some cases, role severely matters, because we may have solved and made one particular role happy and pissed off another role because we are not meeting their needs. So.
I just posted an issue that I got tagged on last night around, I think the title was Make a Wish button. In my last product, we had a submit feedback button. This is basically the same idea. With as many customers as we have, this is probably going to be a high scale piece of feedback if we do it. So you can imagine mapping raw usage that we'll get through instrumentation with some qualitative, high scale qualitative feedback through this. And you could get a sense for, you know, what are the top couple areas that are getting the most customer interest, along with qualitative feedback about what they want. That might get us pretty close to a satisfaction gauge, as well as usage. So I think there's some promise there.
Yeah, the only other thing I've noticed in our usage tracking in general is that because we have so many on-premise private instances where people have disabled usage entirely, it's one of those like black boxes for us, I think, in terms of what people are doing with those installations. And so I think all this stuff is good and nice, but I think we're at a number of black boxes that some of this may not matter. We might be surveying the wrong customers who aren't actually necessarily the ones that pay us the money anyways.
Right, I'm with you, Kai, because we have to make sure that, again, who is giving the feedback and what does it equate to for what our vision is and what the monetary results will be.
Yeah, there's another issue which is in here somewhere that Luca is point on around improving our telemetry. So one, we want to improve the usage ping to get better data back. And two, we want to make it default for customers to send that data, rather than right now the default is off, I think, or the switch is very obvious. And so most people turn it off. So our hypothesis is that we make the default behavior to send it and do a good job of documenting the data that's being sent and highlight that it's non-PII kind of data, that we could get the proportion of customers self-hosted that actually send the data over to be a lot higher. So that could really help.
Yeah,
I think
defaults
that
to
makes
on.
sense.
Here's the documentation on it, how to turn it off. You actually have to go into the GitLab RB file and flip it off.
Okay.
My question would be, I know for certain users that if they believe it in any way can identify them, they may go through the effort of turning it off. So are we very transparent of exactly what data is coming through and exactly how it's used?
Yeah, so to some degree we are. So we actually, so part of the problem with visibility is that we actually are transparent. And so in the admin UI, you can actually go see like the usage ping information in there. And we show you all that's in the payload, right? In an effort to be transparent and say, look, you know, this is really basic information. It's like the number of pipelines that have run, you know, how many issues are created, like, you know, like, so anyways, I'm sure we can improve this, but just wanted to, so I think that's current state, if you will.
There could even be a world where we show them the actual report. And we don't currently do that because, you know, we just send the raw data, but we could show them the report. But it's worth pointing out, because Scott, you had linked to the issue about the Make-A-Wish button. One of the things that maybe isn't really clear from the Make-A-Wish button issue, because I feel like we're going off in a different direction in the conversation there, but is specifically that sales doesn't get a lot of usage information because people do turn off the usage ping and things like that. And that's done at the admin level. But by having a button in the interface, in the self-managed installations, that you can then be like, oh, well, I want to send this message directly to GitLab, the company. It's actually a way to circumvent the thing like, yeah, you're not sending us a usage. We don't know anything about your instance. But now we can see that 20 people just sent me, Make-A-Wish about a certain page. And, you know, you get the domain name and you get the username and things like that. And then that actually helps guide sales. So honestly, and it's funny because we're not fully transparent sometimes in our public issues about why we're putting this thing there, but the Make-A-Wish button is a sales tool. And I feel like you even brought up this thing like, oh, we're going after these two different things. You're like, hey, can we focus on number one first? It's like, you can, but then we're going to go down a different path. We're going to talk about usage statistics and everything else. And the reason that this issue exists is for number two. It's, as a salesperson, I need to get information that is otherwise not available to me.
Yeah, so we need
for those customers. Sorry, Scott, you go.
I was just going to say, so we need to debate priority between those two because those are probably two different solutions. Go ahead, James.
I was going to ask, for customers that are unwilling to share like quite transparent usage data that they can like easily see what kind of data it is, don't you suppose that those same customers would react quite strongly to the idea of allowing any user on their instance to send unfiltered data to GitLab directly without some way of like controlling it? Because the customers that sort of want to be really private, I imagine they also don't want to make it easy for their users to just reach out and hypothetically send sensitive information through some like one-click button in the application. It just seems to me like if I was a person assessing all these risks of information leaking, I'd probably have more issue with the Make-A-Wish button than I would with the usage ping.
So I think in some sense, yes, you got to be a little bit careful what you send. And they might just want like, you know, as soon as we ship the feature, the next issue request is, let me disable that feature. But honestly, I don't think it's quite the same thing. It's the large volume of data that people are worried about. Like, oh, you're sending everything about my instance. And if somebody's like, oh, I'm just going to put in this free form thing, like we already have email, unless they also block out email. Like they could have just emailed us. And this is just a nice, easy way to say, oh, here's some feedback on the thing. If we then tagged in like the whole usage ping data, like that'd be a different story. But if we just include some basic information, like what's the email address of the person who sent the thing, you know, I think most people, I don't know. I think there's a strong argument for that. And then certainly in the case of McBride, who brought this up, at Meraki, they did this and they sold to enterprises all the time and nobody complained whatsoever. So there's
Meraki was SaaS only though, which is the big difference, I think.
They sold physical hardware that went into your thing. And yes, they had a SaaS model for the control panel.
Yeah.
I think also making sure any of the Make-A-Wishes that come in by default private, in case for some reason somebody was bad with their OPSEC, that there might be a chance to review that before opening it up. Can you open up an issue if it's sent in?
I mean, that's a really interesting point. If the Make-A-Wish actually sent it to the help, like our service desk, and it created an issue, we would hope that those would be private issues or whatever. Yeah.
I was gonna say I know Josh, I think pulled up the screen, but if we're talking about sales getting data, an alternative way to approach that may be to incentivize customers to turn on the usage ping by
yes, and we've had tons of conversations about
discounts or other things, right?
Absolutely worth doing for sure.
Yeah, maybe we incentivize them versus trying to build a new feature since we've got a bunch of data that we all want anyways.
But this was just one example of a company that did this very successfully, and it was a different kind of incentive to skirt around the admin incentive and say the individual, hey, send us some context. And it was also very valuable context, but it was also a sales tool, and it's something we just currently don't have.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many folks have deployed the GitLab instance and have access to the admin panels, but this is what it looks like if you haven't. You get this nice little yellow banner when you log in. There's this little wrench icon. You can get more information. You click on more information. You get taken to usage statistics. So you can kind of see that there. And then you can opt into settings, at which point usually it's in here.
Josh, to turn it on up to the right.
Sorry?
In the yellow.
Yeah, so the weird thing is it usually defaults to on, which is how we say it is, but maybe we've changed that to default to off now.
That banner certainly implies it's off because you have to click send usage data. Sounds like
yeah, and this is the defaults. So we can check into that more often, but yeah, so this is just generally what it looks like, right?
Yeah, so
I'm not sure what this button does actually. Why?
That's
Anyways,
the
you
little graphing widget, whether or not you display it or admins or all users. That is behind the code. That's what cohorts and content index define.
Yeah.
See why we don't get any data.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it was default on at some point because when I inherited a GitLab instance at a U.S. federal government contractor, we were sending the usage data and no one had ever thought to look at that, and they were kind of freaked out when they learned that because it just so it used to be default on. I know that. Maybe it's default off now. Because I know when I inherited GitLab version like 7 or 8, it was definitely default on.
Yeah, I thought it used to be. Yeah, so like all this stuff is talking about if you disable it. We'll dig into that, but that's what the experience looks like. So, anyways, just to provide a frame of reference for folks who haven't taken a look.
Thanks for the discovery, Josh. I'll create a fulfillment issue right
now. Josh, number 7 and 8 and 9.
Yeah. So, just question here, basically. As we deprecate the stage channels in Slack, my one question was. It's becoming for folks harder for folks to know where to go get help and ask questions. I've gotten feedback from other parts of the company that even with just the stages, it's hard for people to know where to go. And I imagine it's going to become even harder with the, essentially deprecating the stage groups in favor of the actual underlying groups, right? So is something under, I know it's under monitor, but is it under debugging and help, or is it under APM, right? Like where does self-monitoring sit? And I think the more barriers to this, that's
people already don't know whether to go to security or secure for things, and so we already have that issue. And then if we're suddenly spawning 2 other groups, it's just going to get weirder. I at least know on our side.
Yep.
And verify gets like everything pipeline related, from verify stuff to security stuff, right? Because it's in the pipeline. So same.
Yeah.
Same. And most of the company is actually in the G-Verify channel.
Just wanted to raise that as a concern as we proceed on this change.
Hey, Josh, I'm going to go back real quick to the usage ping. I created an instance yesterday, and it's on. So I believe that default on is working.
It might be core versus EE. It might be the differential.
Well, EE. So mine was EE.
Let me see if mine is core or not. Let me just check. No, it's EE as well. I definitely did not flip the thing. So maybe we need to dive into what's going on here. I just used the default omnibus installation.
How long ago did you create the instance?
This is 11.6.5 in this particular case.
Did you create it 4 months ago, or did you create it recently?
It was then current. Yeah, so that was the latest release at the time.
Okay, thank you.
I should probably update it.
Also, a quick time check. So we've got 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
To whoever's got the next agenda item.
Yeah, sure. Other one, trying to improve documentation on categories and stages. Eric, this jives, I think, with your number 11. So perhaps I can, you can merge yours first, and I'll merge mine. But I want to get feedback on this in general. And the same thing goes on number 9. So just check it out. Don't worry about the plan _ rename of the fields, but just the general question of whether we should have a dedicated maturity field so that the maturity doesn't automatically increment if you forget to bump the date out. So take a look there and let me know. 10 Mech.
Thanks, Josh. So along the same veins of splitting up stage labels in groups. So there's a rollout plan. There's none. I just created it. We have an MR going out now by Remy to clean up the stage labels and group labels. I would ask for this group is to review that the split and mapping is correct. This is important because changing and splitting stages is not just a handbook. We need to update the triage engines. We need to update our dashboards, and historical data needs to be preserved. There was a minor incident where the fulfillment label was accidentally deleted, and we lost some data, historical data on throughputs and also bugs on that front. So we're working on restoring it right now. One second. Yes. So please do not delete the existing team labels. I think we should have a process to either archive them or label them as deprecated. But an ask from this team is please review the mappings because the MR is going to be merged soon, and we want to clean up anything that we missed earlier.
Which one has the mappings in it?
The rollout plan, issue 172. I will make that in bold. Yes, Josh, I don't like seeing tagged with the numbers, so we should have protected and archive labels as a feature as well, because this will be a problem our customers face. We have protected branches and stuff. I think we should consider having protected or archive labels. With that, I'm going to move on. I think Eric had an FYI here, and he's going to move this into the PM and engineering meeting. And moving forward to Virginia, no voiceover. So everybody please read. And then 13, Tim.
Yeah, mine's a quick one. So we actually are changing product categories. We did have individual categories for Maven and NPM, and then we're planning on adding in additional support for other package managers like Conan and NuGet. We combine those all into one category called the package registry to better, those kind of all belong under one banner and not individually. But that merge request is about to be merged. There's a slight difference there.
All right.
Cool.
We good? Anything else urgent?
Right on time, too.
All right. Have a great afternoon, y'all, or evening, Jason.
Bye.
See ya.
See y'all.